is recording it.
Just
Okay.
checking.
Now I see the red light. So thank you for
all
asking.
good. Thanks.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. I think I know most of you, but if there's anyone who I haven't met, I'm Lainey Etkin, and I'm the Executive Director of the FDA Foundation. And I'm so glad that so many of you were able to join us today for this webinar. We are just really, really excited about the PFDD. And we've been talking about it for a while, and it was kind of touch and go for a while as to what was going to happen with everything that's going on in the world these days with the coronavirus pandemic. But we've finally made the decision that this is just way too important to wait to have this meeting in person. And so we are going to do it virtually, and there have been a number of them already held virtually with much success. So we're going to follow that path and do it virtually on November 5th. So we are just really excited about this opportunity to share the voice of the patient with the FDA and educate them about FD. And this is your chance to learn more about the PFDD and how you can participate. So I think we're ready to move on to the first slide. Okay. So the purpose of the PFDD, and by the way, PFDD stands for Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting. And I know that in a little bit, I'm going to introduce probably the two faces that don't look familiar to you. In fact, I'll just introduce them now. You'll see James Valentine and Larry Bauer. And they are experts in the PFDD, and we've brought them on to help guide us through this process. And they both worked at the FDA previously, and now they guide rare disease groups in developing their own PFDD meetings. And they've been really helpful so far, and they're going to bring us through this whole process. And so they're going to talk more about the mechanics of how this whole meeting is going to work in a few minutes. And we're really happy to have them. And I have to say that I've met and spoken with and heard from a number of rare disease groups who have done these meetings. And they speak very highly of James and Larry, and they told me don't do a PFDD without them. So we will be hearing from them a little bit later this morning, and we're glad to have them on board with us. So, so basically, the purpose of the meeting is to educate the FDA about FD. You can read about it in a book, or you can read a scientific report, but it's not the same as hearing about it from the people who actually live with it, either the patients or the people who love them and help take care of them. So this is your chance to have the spotlight and to have your voice heard. And it's a really special opportunity. I mean, we had to apply to the FDA and make a case that this was an important step for our organization and for our rare disease, that they should listen to us and that there was something to be gained for it. And as many of you who may have attended FD Day, and you heard about some of the research that's in the pipeline, there is a hope that there will be treatments that will come to the FDA eventually for approval. And it's very important for them to understand what FD is all about. So this meeting is sort of the next step in preparing for any future treatments that will be coming down the pike. So what will happen during the meeting is you, as people who have FD and people who love and take care of people who have FD, will get to talk about FD. What is it like to live with FD? What are the symptoms that bother you the most? How has your disease progressed as you've gotten older? What symptoms bother you the most? What kinds of treatments are you taking right now? How do they work? How don't they work? What bothers you about them? What kinds of treatments would you like to see in the future? All of those kinds of things are the kinds of subjects that we're going to be talking about at the meeting. And the FDA is going to hear about this from you. And I wanted to tell you also a little bit about some of the goals and objectives that we developed for the meeting, just to give you an idea of the broader scope. Bring together and empower the FD community, giving them a voice and an opportunity to make a positive impact on their own lives. Help the FDA understand how FD is a genetic disease that affects all organs, has both developmental and progressive aspects, and medical needs that differ in children and adults. Demonstrate the large variations in clinical severity among patients and the unpredictability of the disorder. Hear directly from patients and families which symptoms of FD are most distressing and life-limiting. Explain the challenges of measuring FD in the clinic and our quest to find meaningful endpoints that capture real-world experiences to use in clinical trials. Understand patients' and families' tolerance of risk when it comes to testing treatments for FD. And learn about our funded international clinical research program that provides medical support to FD families across the globe and a pipeline for potential new treatments to be safely tested in the clinic. Next slide, please. And why should I participate? Well, if you're not already convinced, really this is a unique opportunity to have your voice heard. Like I said before, they could read about FD and they could study about it, but it will never be the same as hearing it from your voice. And in fact, the report that is submitted to the FDA at the end of this program is called The Voice of the Patient. And that's what we're seeking here, the voice of the patient. And so as you know, before any treatment can go from a laboratory to use in patients, it has to be approved by the FDA, and the studies have to be approved by the FDA. And that's why the FDA needs to be familiar with FD so that we can work with them when it comes time to approve any types of clinical studies. And the more they understand and the more that they're familiar with FDA, the smoother this process will be. So this PFDD meeting gives us the opportunity to educate them and to prepare them for that process. I wanted to share with you a couple of things that other organizations, other rare disease organizations have told me about their experience participating in PFDDs. First of all, they've told me that the process of preparing for and participating in a PFDD has proved to be a community building event, bringing everyone together for a common purpose. They've also told me that the patients who have participated in the process have felt very empowered participating and having a voice in the process. And that this is a unique platform to share their experience. And finally, hosting a PFDD gives familial dysautonomia enhanced visibility in the rare disease world. This really puts us on the map with the FDA, and once we've published the report in other venues as well. And I know we all feel like we don't have enough visibility out there, and this will help that as well. So I am going to stop talking and let Robin say a few words. I know you all know Robin Landau as Sam's mom, and I'm really thrilled and grateful that Robin has signed on to help us put this project together. And I know that Robin has a few words to share as well. Robin, you're muted. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, everyone. I am very glad that you could all come. I know I pressured a few yesterday in the past few days, but I'm very happy to be working with Lainey on this project. It is so important. We really all need to have our voices heard, and we need to look for everyone across our community to share their experiences. Everyone has a different life with FD. We know how diverse our community is. The FDA, this is the only time the FDA is going to be able to hear about how our lives are and how much struggle we have and what our kids need. And the thing is that I think that we need to make sure that we everyone has their voice heard. There's going to be a way for everyone to participate in this, whether it be a video or being on the PFDD itself, or making a call, or writing in a question. Everyone needs to participate. That's the most important thing. And we need to reach out across our community, not only the people who follow the treatment center, but the people who follow Dr. Rubin. Everyone is important in this PFDD. No one's voice should be left unheard. So that's all I really have to say. I just really want everybody to participate, and don't let our past disagreements stop us from having our voices heard. So hope we see you all in November.
Okay. Oh, thanks so much, Robin. And I think we're going to turn this over now to James and Larry to go through some of the mechanics. And I know you all have a lot of questions, and I think that Larry and James will probably answer most of them as they go through this PowerPoint. And again, there will be some time for Q&A at the end. So Larry and James, we'll let you take it away.
Okay, next slide, please.
Already switched for you, Larry.
Okay. So, yeah, hello, everyone. My name's Larry Bauer. I work with James Valentine, and as Lainey mentioned, that we've helped numerous groups with patient-focused drug development meetings. And James and I both have an interest in rare diseases. When we worked, both of us worked at the FDA. Both of us did things with, especially with rare disease patient advocacy communities, and we're really motivated to try to help patient groups in their process of getting approved treatments to treat their disease. And just FYI, these slides will be available at the end. So if you have questions about something that's in a slide, remember that you'll be able to pull the slides up again to review them. So to start out with, why now? Why have this patient-focused drug development meeting now? So the patient's voice, hearing from patients, has historically, it's been absent from the drug development process. So sometimes we never heard from patients until a drug was approved by the FDA, and then the patients would give feedback at that point. Or sometimes a clinical trial wasn't working out and the drug company or FDA wanted input from patients to understand the problem better. Yeah, in the past it was scientists and doctors that did all the drug development without talking to patients that much. But what we found is that the patient voice is critical to drug development, and we would like to have patients' voices heard at the beginning of the process as well as throughout the process of drug development. So stakeholder engagement, working with patients, has become a priority for the Food and Drug Administration. And one of the ways that they developed to collect this type of information is through patient-focused drug development meetings. And this is how they can learn about the disease's impact on patients, both from the patients and from their caregivers. Next slide. So today what we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on FDA and drug development. This is a little dry, a little boring, but it's just to give you some context about how drugs are developed. And then James will talk to you more in depth about patient-focused drug development meetings. And then we'll talk about more specifically, how can you participate in the meeting? What are some of the logistics, and what is the format that your contributions will take, and tips for how to participate? And then finally, at the end, like Robin and Lainey said, we want to leave time for questions, because we want to make sure that if there's anything that you don't understand, that you'll be able to get some information. Next slide. So to start out with, this is the background on FDA and drug development. Next slide. So typically, people researching and trying to discover new drugs, they do it by studying a disease process and they try to come up with a new treatment that somehow either stops, reverses, or stops progression of a disease. They have to test a lot of different molecular compounds to try to find one that actually has beneficial effects. And sometimes they also are looking for new drugs when there's an existing drug to treat something, but it has side effects that are really disturbing for patients. And there are new technologies such as those that provide new ways to target medical products to specific sites within the body and to manipulate genetic material. I'm sure many of you have heard about all the work being done on gene therapies where they actually change the genetic structure of your cells. So once a researcher identifies a promising compound or drug, they develop the drug in a well-established pathway to make sure of two things: that the drug is safe or relatively safe, and that it's effective, so that the drug does what the label says it's going to do. Next slide. So I'm going to take you through these different phases of drug development fairly quickly. So the earliest part of drug development is called preclinical. So this means that it happens before the drug is being tested in human beings. All the work is being done in the clinic or the laboratory. And the goal at this point is to find out if you can tell if the drug is reasonably safe for initial use in human beings, and is it probably going to work against the disease target that they're interested in. Some of this work is done in animal models to, they test it on animals before they move it into human beings. Next slide. So from the preclinical work, they take the next big step into phase 1. This is when they submit something called an IND, or an investigational new drug application. This is a request to the FDA to start using this drug in human beings. So they have to submit a lot of information about the pharmacology of the drug, how do they manufacture it, and any information from studies that they've done so far. And the goal at this point is to get more information about safety and to try to determine what might be the most common side effects of a drug, and also to determine how is the drug metabolized in the body. So once you take a pill or you get an IV, what does the body do with it? Next slide. So after that phase 1 data, which is done usually on a small number of people, maybe 10, 15 people, sometimes even on healthy volunteers, we move to phase 2. This is where that we actually want to try to test to see if the drug is effective to treat the disease. Does it work in people with a specific disease? And one of the ways they do this is to design a trial and compare the drug against placebo. So half of the people get the drug, half of the people are getting a sugar pill or a fake IV. And then you see what is the effect on these two groups of people, and is there a difference in that effect? So you want to try to show that the drug is doing something. Next slide. Once you have that kind of data, then you move to phase 3. In phase 3, it's usually a larger study. So you do a greater number of people. These are always the people that have the disease that the drug is designed for. And it's a continued assessment of how effective is the drug, how long does the effect last, does it work differently in different populations, and what are the various doses that might work. That, the FDA is very interested in finding the most effective dose. And as it continues, the development continues, are there any drug-drug interactions? So for instance, if someone also has diabetes and takes insulin, what is the effect of this new drug with insulin or with a blood pressure medicine? Next, please. Once all that data is collected, it's a lot of information, a lot of data, then the company submits something called a new drug application or a biologics licensing application to the FDA. They usually have a meeting with the company. FDA has a meeting called a pre-NDA meeting to go over the submission before it's sent in. They try to uncover any unresolved issues. And this NDA application includes all of the animal and human data from the development program. So every bit of safety information, everything about the clinical trials that was done, this all gets submitted to the FDA for them to review it. Next slide. So during the FDA review, the FDA tries to determine whether the application's complete. And then once they know that, they assign a review team of specialists to review all of this data. And they try to find out whether this drug is effective and has it demonstrated that effectiveness for the proposed use. And in the safety assessment, is it adequate to conclude that the drug is relatively safe? So in other words, do the benefits of the drug outweigh the risk? Once they complete this process, they either approve the drug or they say they don't approve the drug. And then if it's approved, it goes into the public domain and you start to be able to buy it at pharmacies and hospitals can use it. So in the post-marketing surveillance section, this is after a drug is approved. The FDA continues to monitor the drug to see if there's any serious side effects that are emerging as more people take the drug. And they have certain systems in place where any patient or doctor can call in to report a side effect. Next, please. So what is FDA's role? Next, please. So FDA, I want to just tell you a little bit about what FDA does do and what they don't do. So they don't develop the drugs. This is all done by pharmaceutical companies or people at universities. And they don't do the testing on drugs in clinical trials. The FDA, they do, however, review the design of the trial to make sure that it's going to measure what's important to the FDA. Next slide. These are a couple things about the practice of medicine and drug costs. So the FDA does not have authority to regulate the practice of medicine. What this means is that once a drug is approved, your physician can use it however they like. They can prescribe it to whatever disease they want, and the FDA does not get involved in the practice of medicine and what doctors do and how they prescribe. When they prescribe a drug that for a reason other than what's in the label, it's called off-label use. And it's sometimes it's the doctor trying to, come up with the best treatment that they think something's going to work for their patient. Another thing is that FDA doesn't regulate the price of medicines. We know medicines, especially for people with rare diseases, can be extremely expensive. The FDA has nothing to do with that. They don't know the price when they're doing their review. And once the drug is approved, they have nothing to do with pricing of the drug. Next slide. FDA's main mission is to promote public health. So the FDA review staff, they have expert knowledge on drug development, on clinical trials. They provide technical help to researchers and drug developers. They help the companies design clinical trials and studies. And they have, during the drug development, they have numerous meetings with the drug company to try to help them at every step along the way. Next slide. And if you'd like to find out more information, there's a website here that you can go to read a little bit more about drug development. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to James, and James is James is an expert on patient-focused drug development. He will be the moderator for your meeting. He's done this for many other meetings, and I turn it over to you, James.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry, and it's so nice to be with everyone this morning here from Washington, D.C., where we're located. What Larry just presented is really important, as we're now going to introduce you to PFDD, patient-focused drug development. It's important to know, a little bit, some foundational information around drug development because the patient voice is so relevant throughout the entire time a drug is being researched and developed. And FDA can use what they learn from you as experts in your condition from the very first time they meet with a company, and the companies themselves can use this information and to help inform what they're going to propose to FDA. So also some of those terms may get thrown around at different points or even during the meeting itself, and so we just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of understood that development process, as well as our key stakeholder for the meeting, which is FDA, always good to know our audience, you know, what their role is in all of that. So now I'm going to talk about patient-focused drug development and really where you all fit into that, that kind of process that Larry laid out. Next slide. So this is a relatively new type of activity. It started back in 2012. FDA wanted a more systematic way to gather the patient perspective, both about the condition itself as well as around, you know, the unmet needs that exist, a bit depending on what available treatments a community might have. FDA, previous to this, had been very kind of reactive, you know, waiting for patient groups to reach out to them to raise an issue, and this was often very late in development, you know, usually when, you know, those phase 3 studies were already ongoing, or maybe even during the review of an application for marketing. And that is very late because it's almost impossible to intervene and change something that could have enhanced that program if FDA didn't have that learning earlier on, or if the drug developers didn't have that learning early on. And so FDA recognized this. They had a lot of experience from the interactions they've had with patient communities up until that point, and thought, hey, we should be more proactively bringing in patients, and we should try to bring in larger numbers of patients and their caregivers, because the more people we hear from, the better idea we can get of what the entire community's experience is, and not just a select, you know, handful of people that might attend a traditional type of meeting. They also, back in 2012, recognized that when they're reviewing all of that scientific information, all of that data from those studies that Larry talked about, ultimately they're tasked by law not only to determine what the benefits of the drug are, what the risks of the drug are, you know, that's where they use their scientific expertise and technical knowledge, but they also have to weigh the benefits against the risks and come to a conclusion that the benefits do in fact outweigh the risks of a drug. And so they recognize that that's going to be very different from disease to disease. You know, something for, you know, a more, you know, less serious or life-threatening disease, you know, there might be a different risk tolerance from the community than in something that has a greater burden on a patient's daily life. And so they should calibrate that benefit risk decision based off of the community for which they're reviewing the drug. And who better to help them calibrate that than the patients, who ultimately would be the ones that would benefit from the drug or would be the ones experiencing the risks. And so ultimately FDA created this paradigm. Larry and I were both at FDA at this time and had a hand in it to help make sure that they had this information, because they didn't yet have a tool in their toolbox to do this more systematically. Next slide. So this is just to visualize a little bit that benefit risk decision I was talking about. Again, you see on the bottom half of the slide, you know, FDA's evaluation of the data that it gets from trials, benefits and risks. But FDA formalized that they first need to understand the context of the disease, that both the analysis of the condition, which is the understanding of the most burdensome aspects of the disease, the impacts that's having on daily life. And then second, the unmet needs based off of what are the current treatment options available. And so those were the two areas that PFDD was created to help inform. And so when Lainey was mentioning those different questions early on that we're going to help answer, that's really designed specifically to inform these two areas, you know, which then help FDA set the context for its decisions and make better informed decisions. Next slide. So this specific meeting, this Voice of the Patient meeting for FD, came about, you know, by building on that framework. First, through meetings that FDA had led themselves. They led about 26 meetings, and there have been so far 36 externally led meetings to date. And, you know, they follow a fairly consistent format and framework, and that's because it's been tried and true and has actually been so successful at helping inform FDA. You know, so we evaluated those past experiences and are designing a meeting program, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, that will, make sure that we build on those successes, but also make sure we're going to be able to communicate what's most important to this community. So we're critically evaluating each piece to make sure it fits and makes sense for FD. One thing that FDA has said loud and clear, and I would strongly second this, is that these meetings, the key to success is the patient and caregiver involvement and participation. You are viewed as the experts in your disease. That's because you are the experts in your disease. No doctor knows what it's like, day in and day out to experience the condition, what that actually means in your daily life. If they see you once a year, twice a year, maybe even more frequently, they have 1 or 2 data points to speak to. You have, 365 per year. So FDA knows that this is an untapped wealth of experience, but we can only learn that experience if you all are there and we hear you loud and clear. Next slide. Importantly, while the meeting itself will be, generate important information, and those FDA officials who are tuned in live, which we expect, will get the benefit from hearing from you all directly. That's not going to be the only way your input helps inform drug development and regulatory decision making. There also will be a Voice of the Patient report, which is the summary report of this meeting that takes into account quotes that you all share throughout the day, as well as other types of feedback that we'll get through polling and written comments. And that will be provided to the FDA as well as made available for anyone doing research or development in FD. So it will be a continued resource for them. FDA really, I've talked to many different medical reviewers throughout the agency. They find these reports extremely valuable, keeping them on their desk as a reference whenever they're, working in this area, because they know it's the richest place where they can learn about the disease. Next slide. So now that I've given a little bit of kind of the purpose and why it's important to hear your voices, let's talk about what the meeting actually looks like. Next slide. So importantly, who is it that's being invited to this meeting? Our primary people that we want to attend are you, individuals living with FD, and caregivers. So whether you're a spouse or a parent or another family member or loved one, you all too, in addition to the patients, have so many insights into the disease. And so we really encourage you to attend. You're the ones we're going to be asking to participate. Everyone else that you see listed, FDA staff, pharmaceutical and biotech companies, maybe clinical researchers, they're there to listen and learn. This meeting, as was mentioned, is going to be on November 5th. It's going to be a half-day meeting, but kind of in the middle of the day, at least Eastern time. So that will be from 10 to 3. It's a virtual meeting. It's, more and more details we'll share as everything gets kind of shored up, but it will be a very interactive day. There's going to be many ways to participate, and we'll talk about that. Next. So the agenda itself, this is the flow of the meeting at a high level. We'll of course have some introductory comments, both from the FD Foundation, as well as from a colleague at the FDA. We're also going to help set a little bit of a foundational understanding of FD and some of the clinical considerations from a clinical expert. We can't expect FDA to kind of have that scientific background in every different rare disease. So we're going to provide that to them very briefly to help set up then what is really the core of the day, which are these next 2 topics. And this is where we're going to have many ways that we'll be hearing from patients and caregivers, including everybody that's participating live. First, to help really understand the disease itself, the symptoms and health effects that are most burdensome, and the impacts that those have in your daily life. And then we're going to build on that once we understand FD from the patient perspective, to then understand what it is that you do to try to manage your symptoms and get your assessment of those, as well as your preferences for future treatments. Once we conclude the day, and I'll tell you more about all those different ways that for each of those 2 topics that we'll be getting your input. But, kind of once we spend the bulk of the day hearing from you, we will have some closing remarks to kind of summarize and talk about next steps. Next slide. So I know there was interest from one of somebody on the chat about what are those questions. Lainey was kind of talking about some of the questions that we're going to ask. Well, here they are. These are the discussion questions that kind of frame the overall meeting. And we'll be certainly asking some more specific questions, but this is kind of the framework. These are the highest level questions that we'll ask. So in that first topic where we want to really understand FD, we're going to want to try to understand what is the most significant impacts, or which symptoms have the most significant impact on your life. We know there's so many different aspects to this condition, so we want to know which ones you view as being the most troublesome or the most burdensome. We want to understand those symptoms in terms of how they vary, whether that's day to day, week to week, month to month, or even over the course of years in the progression of the condition. And we want to not just understand what symptoms are most burdensome, but why they're most burdensome and how they impact you. So we're going to ask you about activities that are important to you that are limited, because of your FD. Next slide. Also importantly, I mentioned, how those symptoms change over time, but we know that there may be things that you've not yet experienced, or that, maybe you haven't experienced as severely, but that you may know about or think about in terms of getting older with this condition. And so we want to know, kind of looking towards the future, what fears and worries you have with living with FD. Next slide. So once you've answered all of those questions, we're then going to go to the second topic, which, as I mentioned, is going to ask you about what you're doing to help manage your FD. And this isn't just prescription drugs. This includes pretty much anything that you might think of that you do to make living with FD just a little bit easier. Whether that's other types of medical procedures, whether that's medical devices that you might use, even more holistic approaches like dietary supplements, diet, exercise, or even lifestyle modifications, things that you need to change in your daily life to adjust and try to again, making living with FD a little bit easier. We want to get your assessment of how well those things work. What works well, what maybe doesn't, maybe what is it you're not sure about, as well as what are the downsides. We know that no treatment approach comes with no trade-offs. So whether that's safety, kind of risks like side effects, or the burden of needing to get a treatment, say at a doctor's office or in a hospital, whatever you might view as a downside or a trade-off that you experience, we want to know what those are too. And then once we understand that, that really is going to paint a picture for, how well things are working and what are the gaps, what are the unmet needs. And then we're going to look to the future. And while we all would love for a complete cure for FD, we know that other therapies might come down the pipeline first. And we want to know, what are you looking for in that next ideal treatment? What benefits or what things could a treatment provide to you that would make some difference in your life that's meaningful to you? And what would that look like? So we'll explore all of that. Next slide. And we're going to do that in a number of different ways. We're going to start off each of our topics with a panel of patients and caregivers. These are going to be individuals who will be selected to reflect a range of experiences. Certainly impossible to reflect the full range of experiences with FD, but to get us started, kind of set a foundation that we can then build upon for that broader audience discussion. That audience discussion is going to include all of you that are participating live. We'll be asking you polling questions. You'll be able to open a browser on your phone, on your computer as you're following along virtually, and answer all of those questions live so we get a sense of all of the experiences that we have. And we'll get to see those responses live. And then probably the most or at least it's certainly the longest part of the program, but also a critical one, which is hearing from all of you. So everybody that's tuned in, you're not there just to listen and answer an occasional polling question. You're an expert, and we want you to, kind of participate actively. and share your own experiences. Tell us things, whether they're common or different. And you'll be able to do this a couple different ways. We really encourage you to call in. That way FDA can actually hear your voice. It's one thing, for us to read maybe a comment, which is the other way you can participate. But it's really great if we can actually talk to you, and I'll be able to then have a conversation with you live. And, I can ask follow-up questions, to be more of a discussion and a dialogue, which can be really valuable. Next slide. So given, all of the different meetings that I've helped work with and Larry's helped work with, we put together some tips for effective effective participation. First and foremost, thank you for being here today. You've already taken an important step, and now you have a better understanding of FDA's role and the purpose of the meeting. Keep that in mind. Keep your audience of FDA in mind. Remember what they do and don't do. That'll help frame, kind of the meeting. Think about all of those questions we posed. You can think about those now and start to think of what would be important to share. If you have something important to share, look at those topics, look at those questions, find the most appropriate place that it would be to bring it up. So if you have a side effect of a drug you want to talk about, find that question and topic too about downsides of treatments, and call in. We really want to hear your voice on those issues. If you hear someone say something that you're thinking, oh yeah, me too, I feel the same way, I've had a similar experience, don't assume just because someone else said it, that's enough. It's important for FDA to hear common experiences. So call in, hey, a previous person mentioned, that they have this symptom and that it really impacts their life. I have that too, and here's how it impacts my life. That unique and personal perspective on it will add a lot to the conversation. Just given the format itself, anytime we have a meeting, we have limited amount of time. So we just ask, out of respect for your peers, to keep your comments concise and focused so we can hear as many voices as possible. And keep in mind that we will have an opportunity for you to provide additional comments after the meeting. So if you didn't get to say everything you wanted to say, you still have a way to provide those comments, and they will be incorporated into the voice of the patient report. Next slide. So how can you actually participate now that we're really in the kind of the details here? You can participate by webcast. Again, there's those different activities we'll have you involved in. When you tune in live, we'll be asking you to participate live. You can go ahead and kind of sign up for the meeting by registering now at the website listed here. You can start already, you'll be able to provide your comments, and you'll be able to continue to provide your comments on that same page for up to 30 days after the meeting. You can also alternatively email in any comments that you have to the email address listed on this slide. And again, all of those will be incorporated and included in that voice of the patient report. Next slide. So again, to attend the live webcast, we want you to please register in advance, and you can register on this link here. Next slide. One other option that we have is, I mentioned that we will be having some individual service panelists that will kind of kick off the discussion by sharing some prepared remarks. This is actually done as a video in this virtual format, so you would be videotaping your statement. We also have a unique opportunity in this virtual format to have what we're calling discussion starters. So these will be some people who will be on live by Zoom, just like we are today, that will also be able to answer those questions I'll be posing in real time. If this is something you think you would be interested in, we really would love to have a lot of different people let us know that they're interested, because we need to select people to be those panelists. So if so, when you register using that same link, or going to that same web page and doing that same registration, you'll see an option that you can volunteer to serve in this capacity. And if you're interested in being a panelist, we want you to please register and indicate your interest by July 24th. Because we need to start to select those people so we can work with you ahead of time to prepare your statements. Next slide. So, we're here for you, the whole team, Lainey, Robin, Larry, myself. We're going to be working hard to plan this meeting, but if you have questions along the way, there's anything we can help you with in terms of your participation, check out, you can always reference this webinar. It'll be on the website. Other important information will be there, but you can always reach out and contact us by using that email address. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lainey to, field Q&A that you might have and close out.
Okay. Thanks, James and Larry. I think you painted a really good picture for us, and I hope that many of the questions that everyone had when they started this morning have been answered. I'm sure you might have some more. I see one question posted in the chat. The registration will be up almost instantaneously after this webinar, so check back within the hour. And it will be, you can register to participate in the PFDD itself, and then there's a box that you can check that to indicate if you're interested in being considered as a panelist or a discussion starter. And if you check that box yes, then there's a couple of additional questions for you to answer. And then we will take a look at the questions. We will take a look at the people that check that box, and we will review the answers to those questions. And as James explained, we'll be looking to select panelists who reflect a broad range of the experience of FD. So, from age groups and severity of symptoms and range of symptoms and that sort of thing. So we really just want to paint the broadest picture and the most accurate picture of FD when we present it to FDA. So that's how we will be selecting people. We may need to come back to you and ask more questions or clarify something. So we will be asking everyone who wants to participate to respond by next Friday so that we can start that review process. So,
Lainey,
yes.
That is not only caregivers, but patients with FD as well. So
correct. People with FD and or caregivers, and I'm guessing that the panel and the discussion starters will end up being a mix of that, depending on the answers to the questions. So I'm going to look at the chat here and multitask. The surveys that we sent along last week were not from us. We were just passing them along, so they have nothing to do with FD and nothing to do with the PFDD. I just wanted to mention that we're going to post the recording of this webinar for people who couldn't participate live today. So hopefully there will be other people that will be able to watch it at their convenience and also join us. But if there are people that you don't see here that you think might be good to participate, please do reach out to them, text them or email them or call them. I mean, you guys all know each other, and let them know about this and let them know that you think that they might be good to participate. So really, the people who want to, it's important for us to hear from you by next Friday if you think you might want to participate as a panelist. And you'll have the opportunity to interact with us and make those final decisions. But and registration for the webinar itself, it's not till November, so that will be ongoing until November 5th. But
Lainey,
again, if you want,
yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just to add, we're going to post the slides as well. So you can skip through to specific slides if you wanted to read them versus rewatching the entire webinar.
Okay, so Laurent asked, do our doctors and researchers have any role in the PFDD? We heard that there will be a clinical overview of FD, and that will most likely be Dr. Kaufman, who will tell us all about, who will tell the FDA about FD. The researchers will hopefully participate and attend, but as James said, this is voice of the patient. So the researchers can attend, but will not necessarily have a verbal role or an active role in the program.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah, just to emphasize that this meeting is unique from any other conference, medical conference or seminar that you'll ever have for familial dysautonomia, because the entire day, the entire focus is hearing directly from you all and learning from you. So you all are spending this day to teach your physicians. Physicians sometimes make assumptions about what it's like to live with FD, and this is a time for you to share your day-to-day experiences, like James was talking about. It's also a time for researchers to learn, for people from pharmaceutical companies to learn, and you might even learn from each other by hearing each other's stories in greater depth than maybe you ever have before. So it's a real opportunity, but it can only work if you guys all participate.
I can answer Adam's question. We do anticipate practice sessions. The panelists that are going to be recorded, we're going to look at their speeches and make sure that there's not too much. Well, there has to be repetition, because we all experience the same things some way, but we're going to try to give the FDA as broad a picture of our day-to-day lives as possible. So yes, there's going to be practice sessions.
Yeah,
and there'll be a rehearsal the day before for people who are actually participating live, so that we can understand how the technology works and all of that sort of thing. But the panelists will be recorded in advance, as Robin said, and there will be we will all be working together on what your statement is going to be and what it's going to look like. And so you are not alone here. There are a lot of hands holding your hands for this, because we're all in this together, and we all want it to be have the most impact that it can. You can use this chat to ask questions, but you guys are all here live, so if you want to just speak up and ask, you can do that too.
Yeah, Lainey, one question from me. First of all, James and Larry, thank you very much. It's been very, very helpful to understand this. But one specific question. This is such a varied and complex disorder that vis-a-vis the FDA, Lainey, is there any specific drug or any specific treatment that we are really focusing on for the FDA to really kind of understand thoroughly? Is that one of the goals out of this meeting, or is it more general?
This is to lay the groundwork for any future drug or treatment that should come to the FDA. This is not specific to any particular drug at all. I don't know, James, if you want to add to that at all.
No, I mean, that's exactly right. Whether, this is it's a small molecule approach, or, an antisense kind of oligonucleotide therapy, or, in the future, it's a cell or gene therapy. The same kind of structure and framework applies across the board. So, all of the different reviewers that will be represented by FDA and there to learn and listen, benefit from this being broader, rather than trying to focus on, a particular type of technology. So that's a great question. All of the discussion questions that, like, I went through, answering those helps inform and will help FDA make better decisions, across the board.
Okay, thanks.
James, can you answer the question about FDA approval? It says, after FDA approval, how long would it take to get the trial to Israel, or would it be available only in the US?
Yeah, so maybe I'll answer that in a second, but I think this reminds me of an important point. While we are focused on the Food and Drug Administration, which is, of course, the US regulatory agency, we want to hear from people all, not just in the United States, but, wherever you're located. Any clinical trials that, FDA reviews are likely to include patients participating from, wherever sites might be set up all around the world. And so, this is a great opportunity to make that point, that even though this is the US, regulatory body that we're primarily speaking to, that does not mean we only want to hear from US-based patients. In terms of getting, drugs or trials to other countries outside of the United States, like I said, a lot of the times before a drug's even approved, it's studied in multiple different countries. It could be part of the same study with multiple sites, or maybe there could be kind of country-specific studies. It all depends on, that's kind of up to the drug developer to decide how they want to do it. They could possibly do it only in the US and seek only US approval. And then once it's approved here in the US, go to Israel or another country. But that is not, a requirement. They absolutely, if they choose to, can do it all in parallel, study it in both the US and Israel in parallel, and pursue trying to get marketing authorization in both countries in parallel.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, so the report that's going to come out from this meeting, this Voice of the Patient report, it's going to include a medical overview. All the discussions will be captured. We're going to transcribe a lot of the conversations. There are going to be a lot of quotes in the report. This is going to be a very detailed report that summarizes the meeting. And this report will be in the public domain, which means that regulators in Israel that do the same kind of review work that the FDA does, they will have access to this report. And this report about FDA can inform the regulatory bodies in Israel or, the European Medicines Agency or anywhere else in the world, because it's publicly available. So that's why this meeting is really important.
And we will definitely, we sort of targeted our US group for this webinar, figuring that the FDA would probably want to hear more from our American population. But for the webinar itself, we will absolutely promote this through our Israel and other groups, Canada and South America and Europe. We want everyone to join us, and hopefully we'll get a good showing internationally. We're a small group, so we've got to bring everybody in under the tent. So I think Laurent wants to just share a little anecdote that might help everybody understand how important this process really is in the real world. Laurent?
Yeah, about many of you heard from PTC over the last couple of FD days. PTC was a company that was working with Sue Slogenhoff, trying to bring a small molecule to market. And they actually went as far as the pre-meeting with the FDA. Unfortunately, the FDA, not necessarily understanding our population, put some pretty, relatively speaking, onerous requests out to them, which they felt were too hard for them to overcome, given our population. The fact that we're scattered around the world, the fact that the way our phenotype or the way we express FD is so different from patient to patient. And that was one of the reasons that they chose to back out of this particular track. That's why PTC is no longer working with us. So I firmly believe that had we had this PFDD way before PTC went to the FDA, a lot of letters here, their response would probably have been different, and we might be in a very different situation. So it is important, and thank you guys for doing this.
Okay, so I think we're just about at the end of our time. So please know you can always continue to ask questions. There's an email that you can send directly for PFDDs on the PFDD page on the foundation website, which is also where you can register. You can also reach out to me directly or to Robin directly, or to the foundation with any questions that you have. This is not your last time to answer questions. I will encourage you guys later on today to come back and register for attending the seminar, and to let us know if you'd like to be considered as a panelist or a conversation starter. And again, use your networking. If there's other people that you think should participate, at least for right now, we're focusing on getting our panelists and our conversation starters in place. We'll start promoting the event itself as we get closer. But please do share and encourage other people, because We want this, again, to be the best and most effective event we can. So deadline to let us know is a week from Friday. And we are thrilled to have you with us today. And we are just really excited about the potential that the PFDD will have for everyone in this community.
And as a reminder, his slides and the recording will be sent out and posted on the website.
Okay. And then you'll send out an email when the link is up on the website for us to register and put our names in?
Yep.
Okay.
Go out as well. So
Making sure.
I know live when the recording is finished converting, when all of that is done, that'll all go out all at once.
Okay, the last thing is I know that Lainey was hoping to just put out there that we are still looking for sponsors to help us cover the cost of the event. So if anyone has any connections they think might be important for us to reach out to, we would love to hear that from you. You can reach out to me or Lainey or the office.
Could be people, foundations, pharmaceuticals, or other businesses. Thanks for mentioning that, Robin. Okay. Thank you all. It's great to see everybody. And we're just really excited about coming together as a community and making an impact. Have a great morning.
Thanks for attending, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.